Hi, welcome. We're here to give you a little bit of information about a wonderful class that Square Peg has just recently completed. It was called Introduction to Acting. And I'd first like to introduce myself. My name is Laura Drummond, and I was one of the facilitators of this course. And I'd like to introduce my partner here, Crystal Lee, and she can describe a little bit about her expertise.
Hi, I'm Crystal Lee, and I'm a behavior analyst and work a lot with individuals on their social skills.
Yeah, I'm an actor, professional actor, drama teacher, and facilitator. So an interesting combination for the two of us to get together and put our expertise into this class. It was an interesting process for this class to come together in particular because it was serving the need of or a gap in the film and television world where an agent approached Square Peg, Kendra, in regards to trying to fill the needs for scripts and things with people who are actually on the spectrum to play characters on television, and the lack of diversity there and access to actors, and wanting to encourage people to step forward into this area. And so approached Square Peg about the potential of accessing people who might be interested. And out of that came the creation of a 4-week first-time class around not just acting, but the professional area of being an actor and what that requires and the type of information that people would need to access in order to pursue that a little bit. And so Crystal here was able to provide a lot of the grounding in terms of behavioral pieces, and I was looking at it from a professional point of view in terms of information and the acting skills.
No, especially when we think of acting as being a job or a career and having this great opportunity, it's much different than a lot of other job environments. So trying to hone your social skills and like thinking about the different expectations that might occur was actually really something very interesting for me to think about.
Yeah, and we found quite a few instances where typical information that people haven't been given around how to approach a job was actually contradictory when we were talking about the film industry. So it was nice to be able to kind of walk through some of those pieces. I think what we'll do is give you a little bit of a brief outline of what we did each week. As we said, it was a first time, and it was a really interesting learning experience for the group and for us. The first thing that we did really was in the first week was really important to create a sense of safety and connection between the participants, because we were asking them to take some risks in terms of drama activities and things like that in front of each other. And also because as actors, they would be in a situation like that consistently, where you have to take a risk and you have to show some of your ability emotionally and be vulnerable. And so we were starting to open that conversation with the group. And we started by kind of talking about some of the connections between people and playing a little bit, but we also wanted to cover things that were really basic, like camera etiquette and expectations, which Crystal covered and can draw the connection between the two worlds there.
That's right, yeah, because especially when we're doing these online Zoom courses, we don't always think about, the screen being actually like us in a group, right? As we would when we meet in person. We kind of had that little bit of uncomfortableness meeting in person. We might feel too comfortable sitting at home doing these kind of classes. And so it was great to be able to go into that with everyone and sort of explain the expectations of everyone can still see you in this box. And then thinking about how that will go into, like everyone, when you're doing, say, your audition tapes, which you got into, that, this screen is going to mean a lot, especially now with what's going on with all the online stuff. So it's great to kind of go over that and get people to start thinking about those things and a little bit sort of thinking about the way they're communicating. I know last time we worked together, we worked really hard on having everyone feel comfortable. And I think that really set a tone for a great 4 weeks.
The other thing that we talked about was in that first week was the idea that we already have a lot of the tools in us to be actors. You have a body, you have a face, you have emotions, all those tools are there. It's just a question of learning to use them more effectively. So we talked a lot about an introduction to how your body, to being aware of your body, being aware of your face. We talked about the neutral position. So we just did some work around being observers of ourselves and what those things are how those things are accessible for the work of being an actor. And then we had a section around communication where, Crystal, you talked about an overview about thinking about verbal and nonverbal communications. And there's an interesting dynamic here that part of it is going to be you as a professional actor, and part of it is going to be you as an employee. So when you're being an actor and being another character, there's one form, and then there's you as a professional employee for someone.
Right, exactly. And you know, some of the things that might be acceptable when you're actually in your role and in your character, and things that you might do like through your nonverbal and verbal communication in that space will be much different when you're just being on set, or you're getting ready for the scene, or you're interacting with your agent or the director or other people around you in that workspace. And then also how that, you know, workplace communication might look different than if you're, say, working in an office or working in retail or those kind of job environments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the purpose of that is some people took from the course that they might be interested to pursue acting, but also it was a really good example of having to make some decisions about what types of things they would be comfortable getting outside their comfort zone in. So by laying out the full framework of expectation that it's not just about acting, that it does mean meeting some other people in a different way, they had more of a basis of knowledge for making a decision as to whether or not it was something they were interested to do, because they kind of fully understood the picture. I referred to it several times throughout the course of being kind of like a buffet, where each week we were giving them a flavor of each aspect. So themselves as an actor, themselves as an employee, and then the information outside the wider world in terms of the industry itself and the formats that they would be required to do. So they were getting a taste of all that stuff. So week 2, after we kind of set that tone of a general understanding, we started off by doing something called contentless scenes, which was a really simple little script that we gave each of them and we had them participate in. And that was just an introduction to reading and acting and getting some feedback from me on how they could pursue that scene. And out of that, we then transitioned into talking about hidden rules and the hidden rules of feedback. And that was where you were wonderful in setting that outline for them.
Right, yeah, because that will be definitely an important thing in acting, is being able to accept feedback and thinking about how to accept it in a way that follows all the hidden rules in that work environment, right? And the fact, I think we went a lot into the context of, you know, the director has the big picture idea about how this piece is going to go, and we may have some ideas. But, you know, we're going to be sort of flexible with the suggestions and accepting the feedback, and realizing that the feedback is supposed to be professional, right? And it's supposed to help us grow in our skill, which was, you know, you explained it in so many great ways, Laura, but growing our skills and being able to learn from those instances, right? And not feeling that it's, you know, the feedback is that we've done something wrong or we're not quite performing correctly.
Yeah, and even from a professional point of view, in terms of who you can give feedback to. And so we were saying that sometimes we don't understand because no one's come out and said that it's not appropriate for me to give feedback to my fellow actor on set. So so we talked about different places where we might not be informed. It's not written somewhere, but it's kind of an understanding of that the director gives directions to all the actors, and it's not an actor's job to tell another actor what to do. It's different to be talking about, well, how would we like to approach this together, as opposed to giving feedback. So those kind of interesting little traps of unknowns that we have to learn to be aware of and learn as we go along.
Right. Yeah. And I think we also got into sort of the hidden rules of, besides the director, all the different people you get to meet on set, which
Yes,
I was totally unaware of all the people that are kind of, guiding you around
exactly.
set, and the different hidden rules and social expectations that go with communicating with those people. Right.
Yeah.
And thinking that everyone's on a schedule and a timeline and is doing a job, even though it might not look like a typical job.
Yeah, exactly. And throughout the course, there were different opportunities where we've used video clips or samples of things to illustrate the points. And so at that point, we also had some clips of what it's like, what the atmosphere of a film set is like. And we had a chart of various people. So there were references for people. And at the end of each week, we send those resources to each of our participants so that they could go back and have those resources later on, which was helpful. We kind of closed that week by having a deeper conversation after watching a film clip of a film that was starring two actors that were on the spectrum and a cast that was on the spectrum in real life, presenting their story of a sort of romance story. And we had a broader discussion around representation on film and what people felt good about and what they didn't like in terms of representation, because those were the kinds of conversations that once you enter into the acting sphere, you would be having to think about. Do I want to be part of this script? Does this represent me well? And maybe you can speak to a little bit about what you observe people saying there.
Right. And I think it was interesting to hear just, again, like the variety of opinions that everyone had on it, and how some people were very comfortable with it. Some people were not so comfortable with it. Some people hadn't thought about it.
Yeah.
And so that's usually, and I think too, that it was great to go over that, because we don't want there to be a misunderstanding that because you're on the spectrum and you're playing someone on the spectrum, that you're just playing yourself.
Yeah.
Right? But actually you're sort of growing a character based on your personal knowledge and what you think is a respectful representation, but also what sort of the director's vision is of this story and that character, right?
So the nuances there can sometimes be a little bit gray. And so we have to be sort of open and flexible to the fact that it's not us, it's the character. And do we feel good about that message?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. We always warmed up every week and did some exercises to kind of get connected and get energized and ready to start. And then the following week was around creating good first impressions. And that was around kind of professionalism around your work and how you are professional in your job as an actor. And maybe you can talk about some of the things you covered there.
Right. And that's just thinking about, so we had talked about hidden rules, as you mentioned, we talked about, and you made a great visual for it, like the little work hierarchy of, who you would be socializing with or who you can give direction to or ask questions to. So really the good impression piece is just remembering to implement all those things, or to remember some of those rules and to do your best at it, to build up that good impression. And that also to think that impressions are built up over time. And sometimes we have a short amount of time to build them up. And so we maybe need to be a bit more on, and sometimes we have a longer time to build them up. you know, one of the things, as you mentioned, we were doing those warm-up activities at the beginning of every week. And I think every week they got everyone got a little bit more into them and was willing to be a little bit more silly. We all ended up having, I think by week 4, just rolling on the floor laughing about the warm-up activity. But it was nice to see, because in that situation, that's the impression we're growing. We're in a group where we're all supposed to be comfortable. And so being that silly at that point of time in the class, fantastic.
Exactly. So the impressions in the group mirrored what we're hoping people will be able to do in the real world, is navigate those spaces of what's appropriate and when, and being flexible around that, and also being professional, being on time, doing all of those basic work things that we need to do to be positive. So be agreeable, be polite, be on time, follow the deadlines of when you get given information from your agent about an audition. You need to make sure you've sent in your tape, or you show up on time for your audition, and the same thing on set. So there's those emotional pieces and the vulnerability pieces, and then there's the professional pieces as well. And that sort of tied into, we did something called slating, which is, you know, basically your name and your agent and where you're located. That's going to be at the beginning of your tapes. Or if you do a live audition, oftentimes you might have to do that in front of the director. And so it was good practice to think about yourself in that square of I'm filming myself, and that's a first impression. Do I look like I'm pleasant, or am I scowling, you know, that kind of stuff. So on a basic level, kind of connecting how we look on film to our first impression in a professional way, and using those tips that we talked about in terms of a first impression in a concrete way in terms of slating. Then we went into a little bit around calming strategies and health and well-being, and you covered a good section of some tips for people when they're in a new environment, or they're feeling stressed about a timeline, those kinds of things. And I'll hand that to you to.
And, you know, just being mindful of like, what kind of things do I find is hard, you know, in different places, and keeping that in mind. You know, we talked about maybe kind of brainstorming some of the possibilities that could happen, because that can help us be more flexible when unexpected things come up, right? So like one of the possibilities could be, I hit a huge traffic jam on the way to set. And so, you know, if we've already planned a little bit for that, and that expectation, and it happens, we've given ourselves some extra time, that's going to help with keeping us calm and being more successful. And also just thinking about what we can do that already helps us be calm, and then honing that into that new environment of being on set, right? And what that means. And I think we did some discussion of, you know, on set can often be quiet, or cannot be very much space, or we might be in different spaces. And so having things to do that help us go through the day more successfully in all those kind of spaces can be great to think about too.
And then the next thing after that, we gave them an actual script as you would receive from your agent or from the casting people. So we gave them an actual script and asked them to read through it and play with it. And we gave them some gentle feedback around how to use that script. And, you know, as I said, this was a really full class. This buffet was really bountiful. But it was really fun to watch people take the feedback and actually show change in what they were doing, and integrate what they were being asked to do, and be more brave around that, working with the script. And then we talked about the technicalities of how to do that on a tape, and gave them resources for that kind of thing. So I don't know what you noticed in terms of that process with the students, but.
Yeah, well, it was great to see everyone try. First time we did it in week 3, you know, a few people are kind of like, oh, I had looked at this script, or, you know, I had thought about this script, and they sort of stepped forward and volunteered. But if we needed any other people to fill in the lines, people were a little, you know, not quite jumping in as in the last week when we were kind of wrapping everything up and giving everyone a chance to go over them again. People were jumping in. That first time when we were looking at the scripts and you had sent them out, people I think weren't sure what to do with them when they were reading them over on their own time, or when they showed up to the class for that evening. But the next time we did it, once they had that exposure, they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to read the script and practice it before I come to class. And then I'm going to try out some different things with it from what other people are doing with it in class. And it was great to see like that growth and people stepping outside their comfort zone and that flexibility.
And for me, it was really important to reassure people that you can have different people reading exactly the same words, but each person brings their own quality and take on it. And that's confidence building, in the sense that there's not a wrong way and a right way. There's a certain flavor. And that's really what a casting person is looking for, is they're looking for whatever flavor is going to support the overall story the best. And so that can help to keep some of that personal sense of risk or worrying about rejection. It's not about you. If you're working and doing a good job and being professional, it's really about the flavor that they're looking for.
Right. And I had never thought about that before, and helped people feel comfortable, but helps give you some insight into the industry. That like, if you don't get the role, it's not about you. It's about that, like, maybe you weren't, as you said, the right flavor for that role or for that director, which is, you know,
very helpful.
Better. Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you still don't want to make sure you're working your skill sets, because that's still important. And it can be evident when people aren't doing the work. But that's a separate issue than when you've been professional and you show up and you've obviously prepared and you've done the best you can. That's a very different thing. And then our last week was basically after giving people all this information about what it would be like for them to get to set, how to audition, what the process is like, we wanted to give them a broader sense of the supports that are out there. And so we had a guest speaker come in, Michael Cheevers from the UBCP ACTRA union, to talk about the role of the union, how they're there to support, what kinds of resources that they could find. We also had Kendra come back talking about agencies and what an agent's role is and how you would get an agent and what's required of you, and answered a lot of questions around that, so that people who were seriously considering this had access to a broader sense of the big picture and what they would do next and what kind of resources they had. I found people had some really insightful questions.
Right. Yeah. And definitely questions like I had never thought of, but also like a lot of information, again, in that behind the scenes part. Like, I think, you know, a lot of people, I think I would know roughly what happens when we're making a movie or a TV show or whatnot. But then all of these detailed parts about what it means, like in that workplace role, and all the supports you can have, and like how to get an agent and that person representing you and things like that was great. And I think really great if you're going to go down pursue this career.
And I think particularly for the participants we had in this particular group, one of the key messages was that if you are a union member, that they're there to support you if you should have some difficulty on set, and that if you choose to pursue this and you get an agent, the most important thing is that you have a relationship with that person as your agent who can be your advocate. And so understanding what you feel about being on the spectrum and being an actor, and the ways that you need that support, or the messages that you want to send, and the kinds of projects that you want to participate in. Those are the kind of dialogues you want to have with an agent and have thought about in advance. So it really had people connecting that idea of the end product and who I am and how I want to be part of that. I need to create that support system around me that's on the same message as me. So then the last part of the class was really just finishing up with our scene work and connecting with our group. You know, some people will choose that this is something they pursue, and some people just really felt that it was about confidence building.
Definitely sort of those people who are like, this is interesting, and I've actually found out that I enjoy acting, like maybe I would like to do some drama games nights or something, but I'm not really into the full getting an agent, memorizing scripts. and going down that path. And then other people, I think, were really encouraged by, yes, this is, I've had a little bit of experience, and now I've kind of had this, booster session, and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, it was quite a diverse group in that sense. Although overall, my sense was that no matter what people were taking away from it, whether it was a choice to move forward or not, they enjoyed the process and felt like there was a benefit to them, even if they didn't go forward. So they felt like, oh, I feel more comfortable speaking with people, or I enjoyed this, or I enjoyed that, or I enjoyed the social aspect. So there was a win for somebody, whether or not they decided to choose it as a profession. It was something that they were interested and engaged by. Well, I think that's it. And I know you and I are partnered up for more stuff. That was our introduction to acting.
Yes, awesome.
Yeah.
Bye.